Welcome to Closed. We are really excited to have with us today Councilwoman Julie One, who represents District 26 in Queens. Did I say that right? Okay. Councilwoman One plays a key role in shaping the newly approved Long Island City Rezoning. It's a plan that's going to bring nearly 15,000 new homes and major investments into parks, schools, and infrastructure to a long industrial stretch in Queens. She was working really hard to get this done. We've actually been trying to get the councilwoman on the podcast for a few weeks, but you've been working really hard on getting this rezoning package done. So thanks for finally being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's definitely a good time to be here to celebrate instead of saying, I'm not sure how it's going to end.
Yeah. Well, we don't have champagne; we have coffee, but maybe we should have revisited that once you had the success earlier this week.
Well, matcha is plenty for me because I don't even drink alcohol.
Well, congratulations on your major part in getting this passed. I guess why don't we start for people listening who don't know what the OneLIC rezoning plan is, just high level. What does it consist of, and then we can kind of get into the details.
One LIC, as people now very cheekily say, one LIC, WON. It's a 2-year-long project that we have worked on as a community and with the city of New York to rezone the part. We called it one LIC because right now we have a very fractured district. Within Long Island City, I represent Court Square, a neighborhood, Queensboro Plaza, Hunters Point, which many people see across the river, and they're like, yeah, Long Island City, the Pepsi Cola sign with the nice towers. And then we have Queensbridge houses, the largest NYCHA in the whole country, or public housing unit in the whole country. And yet, in the middle of these neighborhoods is a large swath of industrial business zone where people don't like to walk through because there's not enough lighting. We've had a slew of muggings, we've had a lot of close calls, and industrial part that is underutilized to say the least. But more than just being underutilized, it kind of serves as a physical barrier from making it a cohesive neighborhood, especially between Queensbridge houses and Hunters Point and Court Square, where a lot of the wealth is. Because people literally say it's the other side of the bridge. So Queensboro Bridge and the industrial area on the other side of that are people living 200% at the poverty line, and on the other side are people who are paying $8,000 to $10,000 a month just for rent.
Right. So in addition to like the socioeconomic barriers that separate the two communities, there is a physical barrier between the communities.
And in the 80s, what we saw is that the Department of Transportation and the Parks Department put up physical fencing with barbed wires where we used to have 5 areas of entry between the sides of the bridge to fencing that one up, and they took away Queensbridge Baby Park, which used to be there with a sprinkler system, a basketball court, a handball court, and a playground for little kids. That was taken away without park alienation, so without due process with the government, and they made it into storage and parking for these agencies, and they put up the fencing and barbed wires, which served to close out the 5 areas of entry as Hunters Point was being built out, and instead it closed it down to only 2 areas where you could enter through the other side of Long Island City.
So how is this proposed plan going to change all that? What look, we still things still need to happen. This is all on paper. These are ideas that need to be implemented. But if the idea comes to fruition, if it's executed perfectly or close to perfectly, what will change, you know, with respect to the barriers of entry and just the overall cohesiveness of the neighborhood?
Yeah, first and foremost, we're going to be building about 1,500 new homes. Through this project, this is the largest housing rezoning in the city's history. And within this single project, in one single swoop, we're building 1,500 new homes, 4,350 of them permanently affordable. And that is more than the borough of Queens has built in the last decade. And that is also more than the city of San Francisco has built in the last year.
That's wild. And San Francisco, I think I've heard, is like that's one of the cities that's growing the fastest from from a housing perspective, and this is going to outpace if it comes to fruition, going to outpace that. So other than the new housing, which is incredibly important because the city has a major housing crisis, a major housing deficit, what else is the plan going to do to kind of bring the neighborhood together?
So to close the gap in between in between the neighborhoods of Long Island City, we're connecting the waterfront from Queensbridge Park all the way to Gantry Park, and that is what most people, especially on the Manhattan and Brooklyn side, are familiar with. Gantry Park, the beauties of it from across the river. Now it'll have connectivity because we've been able to get an agreement with Silver Cup, NIPA, so all the landowners, and Con Ed to allow us to build a waterfront esplanade across the waterfront between the two bridges to make sure that we have that connectivity. So on one elongated park. And
When you say we, by the way, you were pretty instrumental in doing that.
yeah,
You're being modest, right? You were pretty heavily negotiated in the negotiations with at least Con Ed to acquire the use of that land,
yeah,
right?
I would prefer as a politician not to have to use public shaming, but I had to because until the last moment, Con Ed would not commit on paper, was not willing to go through the legal process unless we committed to paying them $4 million to purchase the easement of the land.
That sounds like every conversation that I have with Con Ed.
I know. They just got another rate hike approved by the city and the state. So it's not an easy conversation, but I will give them credit. They have been willing to pick up my phone calls. The assembly members, Ron Mamdani, and I have gone there in person on site to point at the parking lot and the waterfront to say, wouldn't it be nice if we connected this from one side to the other so that the residents can have integration of this community instead of segregation? And they nodded their head, but it took us a long time to get to a place where they were willing to give it to us for free or at a low cost.
We have to do a whole another podcast about your tactics in getting Con Ed to answer the phone, because I don't know how many times I've called them and I can't get a real representative to talk to me about a power outage. So we'll do that for another podcast.
Yeah. And we're also going to be clearing out and restoring the park underneath the Queensboro Bridge that was unlawfully taken away from Queensbridge residents in the 80s. So that is going to equate to 5 acres of public space, which is almost 3.8 football fields worth of green space, right back to the Queensbridge residents and Long Island City residents at large.
Um, well, I know that there were some other commitments. I think there's also a $206 million investment in Queensbridge housing, right? Why is that so important? Why is Queensbridge in need of upgrades to its housing? How will that positively impact Queensbridge, but also the broader community?
We have, at any given moment in my district alone, 37 homeless shelters and migrant shelters. That means at any given moment, I have 10,000 people who are unhoused or homeless. And we set ourselves a goal of making sure that we were building enough housing to put a roof over their head. And that is how we came to negotiate for 4,350 units. And that is forecasted by Department of City Planning to house those 10,000 people. But we said that's not enough. We can't just always build new housing. Of course, we have to do it at faster speed and we should build masses as much as we can. But we have to also look at preserving and maintaining existing affordable housing, which is Section 8 and Section 9 housing, which I have right there in my district. So, what the $206 million will do is modernize the apartments to make sure that the vacant units are coming online because we had more than 100 that were just sitting there empty so that we can get more people, transition them from shelter into permanent homes to give them more stability. It's just a matter of investment. We have to invest in the vacant units to bring them online if they were there, if they went down on a fire, or if there's some sort of plumbing and sewage issue, if there were any other building code violations like asbestos and lead. So
Are these issues that plague the Queensbridge houses, plumbing issues, asbestos?
yeah, it plagues all of the NYCHAs because NYCHAs in general have been underfunded or defunded for centuries. I mean, decades.
Um, so I think, those were some of the main, I guess, commitments that you were seeking as part of your backing of the plan. And I know initially you said prior to the changes that you helped enact, you didn't believe the plan went far enough. Do you think the commitments are far enough, or was it a matter of I think I've negotiated my heart out, and this is kind of the best that I can get to, and this is going to be really valuable to the community. So I'm willing to take not quite as much as I wanted, but enough that I'm willing to back the proposal.
Mm. It's important to put into perspective that this is not a normal rezoning. This is a neighborhood rezoning. I think my community also, many of them don't understand that this isn't a private ULURP. The
Yeah.
fastest growing neighborhood in the city, my community board especially, both Community Board 2 and Community Board 1 are extremely well knowledged, seeped in the land use zoning text and they really understand urban planning. But the issue that I have is that people, because Long Island City has not had a neighborhood plan in recent history, that they aren't aware of the difference between a private ULURP and a neighborhood ULURP. So a comprehensive plan. And what I need people to understand that I've been trying to continue to evangelize my community is that I was not negotiating with the developers. I was negotiating with the city of New York. And that meant my district office and I, so my land use team and I, have reviewed every single neighborhood plan in city history, and we start to formulate the math between how many units were built and how much investment they received from the city of New York. And that math, the envelope was about $400 million on average for those projects by the average built. So we knew that if we followed that math, that we were entitled to almost $2 billion, which is what we set out to get.
So it was a data-driven negotiation. You went to the city with hard data. You didn't go to the city with we think this.
No, no, no. And we knew that that's what we were entitled to. And if you look at all the projects that have passed this year, they all settled at about 400 million, even if they were entitled to more. So we've done a tremendous job. This is the highest amount of investment in city history. We quadrupled what most neighborhood rezonings receive in investment. And we didn't get to an arbitrary number. We didn't just push, push, push. We knew from not only our 2 years of data aggregation that we've collected from community engagement, we had 21 public events. We had 2 surveys that went out with more than 1,400 people who gave us feedback. We had multiple town halls, but we also incorporated the data that we had and public sentiment from the 4 failed rezonings that took place in Annabelle Basin before us. So we worked with the Department of City Planning when they first reached out and said, "Hey, what do you think about this area?" And I said, "I'm open to doing a comprehensive plan, but we need to learn from our mistakes. We don't want to have a 5th failed rezoning." And that's how we came to conclude these are our top 5 priorities. And of course, we had more than that. We had a laundry list of things from the community board's resolutions, community feedback. So we had a few pages of points of agreement that we wanted to meet, but we knew that at the end of the day, it's a compromise, and we had to be disciplined and focused on making sure that we were zoning into the top 6 priorities that the community had asked for, which is affordable housing, Queensbridge connectivity to Gantry Park, making sure that we had adequate green space, especially restoring Queensbridge Park that was wrongfully taken away from them, enough school seats. Our district was short 1,300 school seats, and also making sure that there was funding for sewage and plumbing infrastructure and waterfront resiliency.
Yeah. Perfect can be the enemy of good. So it sounds like you achieved a great deal of what you wanted to achieve. What can you talked a little bit about kind of negotiating with the city and how you approach the negotiation and the data-driven methodology. Were there other things that you drew on during those negotiations? Was it a lot of getting feedback from your community and taking that feedback to the city and saying this is what the community wants, this is what it deserves? Like how it sounds like there were 4 failures in the past. Was that entirely on like lack of preparation, lack of community feedback, or were there other things that you learned from in kind of going for this 5th successful rezoning?
The 4 failed rezonings before me were all top-down driven approaches. The most infamous one is Amazon HQ2. That was a backroom deal that was done without community input. And then after it began to fail and unravel, they tried to scramble saying, "Well, here's what our proposal is. Can you give us feedback on it?" After the project was fully baked.
Whether it's a private entity or in this case the council, this is what we need.
Yep. And also I think the difference is Amazon, for example, they wanted $3 billion in either tax rebates or some sort of give back for the company. And instead, that is what we rejected. And instead, we ended with this project, which instead of giving away $3 billion of taxpayer money, we're actually receiving our taxpayer money right back to our community for community input and $2 billion.
It's profit driven versus community driven was where the
Yes. And we spent over 2 years, like I said, getting community feedback. We have spent thousands of hours. We knocked 8,000 doors, my team and I. And we also made sure that every step of the way, we were working in partnership with the Department of City Planning. So they had to be in my district in all parts of the neighborhood, doing these town halls, doing the community input sessions, doing the survey, for example, making sure that there were mailers sent out, using Link NYC ads to drive awareness of the project that's happening. So it was really a grassroots approach instead of top down, of someone, the powers that be, telling us what we need to accept and shoving it down our throat. And instead, us coming to the table saying, okay, collectively, we agree that the last 20 years this has not worked. And this was the negative sentiment. And these were the obstacles that kept on blocking us. So what are we going to do to appease the concerns? Because if you listen to their concerns underneath the frustrations of my constituents, it was all the same. Our apartments are flooding. It's true. We're in a flood zone. When there was a hurricane, everything flooded. Yes, we need waterfront resiliency, which is the beauty of Ganchu Park, of how that was built out. Our kids have no school seats. Yes, we are short 1,300 school seats. We don't have
What does
enough
that
grades.
talk to me about what that means? What does that mean? Not enough school seats, and why is that so important?
The city of New York decided to build incredible amounts of density in my district, and they never built the schools that were promised.
Okay.
Our school seats are not enough, and we're already over capacity, breaking the law for fair class sizes, and the kids now have to take a bus to Astoria, Sunnyside, or Greenpoint to have a seat in a school because they only have 2 elementary schools when we really needed 4, even at the population that we currently are at. It's shameful. And unfortunately, we had politicians who lied and announced the schools, but did not tie funding to having that school built. And the agencies did not cite the school ever after it was announced.
So they gave lip service to the problem and didn't really do anything to cure it. That's shocking to me. Like we're in New York City, the greatest city in the world, and there's not enough seats in in Long Island City, which I think, you live there, you work there, you serve a constituency there. I lived in Williamsburg, not that far away, but I would go to Long Island City a lot, and you think of it as like this vibrant, um, well-funded area. That's kind of like from outside looking in, that was my belief, but I missed all of this, and it's just shocking to hear.
Oh, you have no idea. We're completely underfunded. They took advantage of private developers who saw great market opportunity and they built the apartments, but it was before the unified stormwater rule, which means that they could take their one block and upgrade the sewage and plumbing. But guess what? The surrounding blocks remain the same. So what does that do to our sewage and plumbing? Even last Christmas, I was on the phone with my constituents who couldn't serve their guests water on Christmas Day because it was brown. And I had DEP calling me saying, it's safe to drink. Just don't wash your clothes with it. You don't want me to do laundry with the brown water, but you want me to tell my constituents to drink the brown water? And we've been in the news multiple times because my district also had a child that drowned and died. A whole family died from the last flood, Hurricane Ida. And even most recently, we have one street right by Murray Park that is infamous. We call it the river because anytime there's minimal rain, the whole entire street starts to flood.
Yeah, this doesn't get nearly again, what you're telling me is like, I can't believe somebody who, like, I read the news frequently, we're obviously very invested in New York City and in real estate in New York City. These are just not things that I was aware of. So I'm sure that like the majority of the populace is not aware of it, and the solutions that you're proposing are kind of common sense, like obvious solutions to those issues. Like, what else would you spend government money on other than like more school seats for kids, saving families from flooding? Like, this is common sense, obvious stuff. And it sounds like it took 2 years for you to get to a point where someone would say yes to you, much less all the years that came before it, right?
Well, it's the difference in, like I said, the rezoning process itself. Instead of doing a private ULURP building by building or block by block, we decided to do a comprehensive plan of over 55 blocks with the city of New York saying the city needs to invest in green space. You can't just build apartments and then wait and hope that the developers are going to decide, you know what, I'm going to forego of this one block and not build housing and let me make that a park. They're not going to do that. It just doesn't make sense for them financially. And now we've put the responsibility on the city of New York to say, you have to make sure that we are responsibly developing the neighborhood instead of just allowing developers to build their one block and everything else needs to be figured out on its own.
Do you think this model is replicable across other underserved communities in New York City?
Yes, it should be the only way we do it. In most major cities across the country, the city government or the governing entity itself has comprehensive planning. New York City is one of the few that does not. And it does not bode well for the city of New York. It is not helpful for the developers or the residents.
I know that I'm not terribly well versed in the specificity with respect to them, but I know there were some ballot measures that were passed in the last election that are going to impact the council's ability to kind of uh, be as involved in these types of zoning projects moving forward. Is that going to be a hindrance to future efforts like this?
The devil is in the details. No one seems to be able to define the affordability levels to me when they say fast tracking affordable housing. What are we talking about? So I'm gonna wait and see. And some of my colleagues would probably be very upset if they heard me say it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I believe proposals 2 to 3 are actually a positive thing for our city. A neighborhood like mine should not take on the brunt of doing all of the housing development for the entire borough of Queens or for other outer boroughs that are not doing their fair share. Outer boroughs in eastern Queens and southern Queens below my district. I know that Jamaica, Southeast Queens, Rockaway, they have been doing their fair share, but there are other parts of Queens that are not doing it, as well as parts of Bronx that refuse to participate. And we saw that very often currently with our colleague who refused to take affordable housing or supportive housing for formerly homeless people in their district because it's their community just didn't want any development. So now what those proposals will do is allows them to bypass the community and council member and build the housing that's needed, especially if it's 100% affordable. So I think that's good, but proposal 4, I have a lot of concerns about because it makes me lose my leverage. I will never be able to negotiate the way that I did for this project ever again because now instead of having to negotiate with me, they can negotiate with the speaker of the council, the mayor, as well as the borough president. And I'm not sure if you're a parent, but you know that if your son or daughter knows that even if I ask mommy if I want this piece of chocolate, but I know that her final word no is not no, I can go to daddy, I can go to grandpa, I can go to grandma, and one of them will give me this chocolate bar.
Well, definitely grandma and grandpa will give it.
But you know how that works. You know that you lose your leverage when your word is not final. And that is what the proposal has done. And I don't know about you, but I don't know what real estate developer prefers to negotiate with 4 politicians instead of one. So I was like, you have fun with that.
I guess it depends on the politician, right?
I guess, but you take your chances because we term out or we take different jobs and you don't know who you're going to get. You don't control the electorate. And now you're taking your chances and it's a gamble of having to negotiate with 4 politicians instead of one.
Right. Um, so the next step to this is kind of turning what seems like a great rezoning proposal into reality. So, what are from your perspective, what are the obstacles that are going to be most challenging in terms of implementation? What does the road ahead look like?
Well, we are looking to see what the transition will look like. Who will take over EDC? EDC is going to be an important quasi city agency that we work with to make sure that all of our legal transfer of the land, especially for the easement between Con Ed and the governor and the city, take place on time in a manageable way at a reasonable price, zero to a low cost price. And we want to work with EDC to make sure that all the 8 city agencies vacate underneath the Queensboro Bridge on time at a reasonable price because they have to relocate themselves and we have to find them an alternative site. So all
On,
of
on
the
on time at a reasonable price already sounds like it's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
Right. And we'll have to work very closely together. So we're very anxiously waiting to see who the new DOT commissioner is going to be, the new parks commissioner, EDC president. So all of those things are going to make a big impact. But I do believe that I do have a partner who was very involved in this project, who knows the streets of my neighborhood, who understands what's at stake with this project. Because if you continue to erode community trust and you make all these promises and you don't keep them, then no one's ever going to believe you. You're not going to have support for any future projects. And Zora Mamdani has come out publicly saying this is a huge victory for Long Island City and has stated his support after it passed. So, from our conversations, I do believe he's going to be a good faith partner in making sure this gets done. And we are also standing up our community oversight committee. It's what Gowanus had with their neighborhood rezoning, and we're going to make sure that we're continuing to engage with the government as well as developers to ensure that all of our promises are kept.
What does the ideal timetable look like? So, and nothing's ideal. Nothing's in a vacuum. There's a million variables at play. You don't even know who some of the people that are going to be vital to make this happen are going to be yet. But in an ideal world, what would we be looking at? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? What does it look like?
So it really depends on what you're referring to. So for the housing for itself, for the private development on for housing, those are already going into effect. The demolishment has already started since last week once it passed. Scaffolding is already up, and the developers are ready to build, and they know that they will have no problem with vacancy. It's because we are less than 1% in Long Island City, and the demand is extremely high. So I assume that a lot of the private development that has been waiting for this rezoning to pass, especially with the four failed ones that took place before me, they are more than ready, willing, eager. They already have their investments lined up and they're getting ready to build. I would assume in the next 3 to 7 years max, those apartments will be built, the 1,500.
That probably will be helpful with respect to everything else you want, right? Because in terms of attracting people, getting the best bang for their buck on what they're building, they want the green space. They want the connectivity between the neighborhoods. They want even, every community to have good plumbing to it all works together, right?
Yes, especially the unified stormwater rule, because that's a law that went into effect in the last few years, where now you won't even be able to get your permits approved from the city of New York if you aren't adequately upgrading and investing in the sewage and plumbing for the sites that you're building on. So there's requirements that are in place.
So other than kind of not knowing who the people are that will be involved in making this a reality, what do you view as some of the other challenges? Or let me put it another way, the constituents, people in your neighborhood, what do you think they're concerned about with respect to, or what do you think they feel like might be the biggest obstacles to this is actually taking place, right? Because I'm sure it sounds great to many of them, but if you're sitting at home having dinner and you're like, well, I'm not sure this is going to happen because of X or because of Y, like what do you think are the real things to be concerned
I'm
about?
not sure if people even really feel that way because for Long Island City residents, they, other than the schools, they've just seen the apartments go up as promised. I know that in other parts of the city, they'll say, well, that's rezoning took place 5 years ago, just sitting there empty. We never have that problem. And for us, I've been incredibly diligent in making sure that our promises will be kept. So I have, in addition to our points of agreement, we also have letters from each agency. And in addition to the letters, I also have in writing promises from the Office of Management and Budget that the funding will be there. For the middle school, for example, that is an expedited project, and that middle school will be built within the next 3 to 5 years max.
Is that built with private funds or public funds?
No, it's always public funds. A developer can donate their land to the school construction authority, but the building is done through public funds, through taxpayer dollars.
Um, well, it sounds like you're pretty bullish on all the hard work that you've put into this over the last couple of years paying off. And we're certainly excited to see what happens and love for you to come back in the future to kind of talk about how it's going and how it's progressing and what's other than making sure this happens, what's the next thing you're focused on? What's the next big challenge for the council and for yourself?
So this project is just beginning because like you said, the same way we had a very thorough tracker where we tracked our workflow as well as all the points of agreement and the written commitments to make sure that every single thing is moving and what phases they're in and how much progress we're making. That work will continue, except now we'll have outside accountability because I don't believe in self-quality assurance. My government team and I should not be the only party keeping ourselves accountable. I think external parties should be paid to keep us accountable, which is what will be stood up with a foundation. In addition to that, we also have the public land. If you look at the map of our rezoning, Annabelle Basin has a large site called the Department of Education Building on Vernon. We also have the Department of Transportation Building, and Small Business Services, I believe, is the agency that has two parking lots on the site as well. The Department of Transportation building should be built into 100% affordable housing. We have a clear commitment from that. And what will happen to the rest of the public land will be up to the mayor through the request for proposal process. So he's going to probably consider preserving the existing building, or he may consider adaptive reuse. Who knows what he will do with his new team? And that's why I'm saying it's going to be extremely contingent on who the new leadership team is with his administration and what they decide to build on the land. So we'll be looking at that very closely. In addition to that, we're going to continue to push for comprehensive planning. There is a plan sponsored by Donovan Richards, the borough president, called Reimagine Ravenswood. So everything north of my project, where Ravenswood and Queensbridge North is, that is part of another study that they're doing called Reimagine Ravenswood. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. I also finished a neighborhood study for Northern Boulevard from Queensboro Bridge all the way down to Woodside. And currently it's a massive stretch of land making up of mostly car dealerships. I think the time of car dealerships in Long Island City should come to an end. We have to build more housing. It's one of the most public transit rich areas of Queens. Why waste it on car dealerships that don't serve my residents? I want to see housing there, so we'll be working on projects along Northern. And I'm also going to probably consider new private ULURPs that have been sitting waiting for me to finish OneLIC. So we have a pretty big backlog. We never have a shortage of rezonings to work on in Long Island City, and I'm always happy to engage. We're also considering I would love to do something for LaGuardia Community College because we have Bard High School there. Robert Wagner's also there. Middle College is there. We have another middle school there. So there's a huge campus life there in the middle of an industrial business zone. And south of it is the Newtown Creek. And we have been fighting with the concrete company that's been squatting on MTA public land, preventing us to have waterfront access and building out a nice waterfront, which we can with the support of the Congresswoman and getting some congressional funding to redo Newtown Creek the way that we were able to on the Brooklyn side, a waterfront esplanade.
Well, if you ever need a law firm to remove squatters, I know of one.
I'd be happy to engage because I'm always ready for a good lawsuit to get squatters to be off of public land.
So are we. So we can talk about that offline. Well, we're excited to see what will happen next. I did want to say one other thing, which is, it's so interesting because everybody who kind of comes and sits in this podcast booth, and we have a diverse array of people, all left, right, politicians, journalists, developers. But I really do think that there's one issue that everybody's aligned on in New York City, which is we need more housing. Like every single person, they have different ways of getting there, and they have different philosophies about it, but that is the thoroughfare for every single point of view. And I feel like the city really can come together to make sure that that happens in a variety of different ways that service the entire city. So I was happy to hear you say, like, we need more housing, because that's 100%. Everybody's 100% in agreement on at least that one issue. That could be like the defining issue of New York City.
I think everyone agrees that we need housing. It's just most of my constituents are tired of paying $8,000 in rent. And they miss the days of Sunnyside, Astoria, and Long Island City where they could pay $800 to $2,000. And we have some lucky residents who brag about their rent-controlled unit that still survives, multi-generational. That they pay $800 for a two-bedroom, to rent-stabilized units where they have a three-bedroom for $2,000. But I tell them we can't do nothing. We taking 25 to 30% of affordable housing is better than building none. So
Well, thank you for your part in that. Thank you for everything you've done for Queens. And we'd love to have you back in the future. If people want to find out more about what you're doing, follow you on social media, where should they go? What should they do?
yeah, pretty accessible on social media. It's just Julie J1 WON, and you can always direct message me. You can always email us at district26@council.nyc.gov. I am very lucky that we have a great land use director and a land use consultant and a team that has become very well versed in land use as well as a community. So there's never a dull moment in Long Island City or Sunnyside, Woodside, Astoria. We are fortunate to have the attention of the sitting mayor as well as the future mayor to make sure that we are continuing to become the best neighborhood for current and future residents.
There's never a dull moment in Long Island City. Is that the actual slogan?
For me, it is, because I wake up every morning wondering what's it going to be today.
Maybe we'll title the episode that. Thank you so much, Councilwoman, for being here, and we look forward to seeing what comes next.
Thank you so much.
For more on all things real estate and the law, subscribe to this and our other podcasts. Follow Bergstein, Flynn, Knowlton, and Polino on social media. Subscribe to our newsletter and go to bfklawoffice.com. That's bfklawoffice.com to learn more.